So Real is a soon-to-be nonprofit located in Palo Alto, California, and we strive to ensure that twice exceptional or 2E students are thriving in school by raising parent and educator awareness and understanding through resources, tools, events, and services such as this one. We have a website with a lot of information, recordings of previous events, blog posts that may be helpful to you. One of the most popular items on the website is the educator one-pager, the 2E fact sheet, which you can share with teachers or other people in your family to help give a brief explanation of what 2E is, and a checklist to learn more about if your child is twice exceptional, as well as many other interesting event recordings and other information. So we encourage you to check that out. We have a few other sessions coming up in our speaker series this fall. In just a few weeks, we have a parent panel speaking about their experiences at various private schools that are local to the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as an educational consultant. In November, the Stanford Neurodiversity Project is hosting a summit online for 3 days, and Real is helping put together 3 of the sessions, which are about K through 12 education. We're going to have a student panel, and we're going to have some researchers speaking about strength-based approaches to supporting neurodiverse students. And we're also going to have a panel of parents and experts and psychologists talking about fostering identity in neurodiverse students. So we encourage you to sign up. And we're also going to have Dr. Susan Baum, who's a renowned specialist in 2E, talk about writing struggles, since we know that's a big area of struggle for a lot of 2E kids, and you can RSVP to all those at our website. And we also have a Google group with a couple hundred folks in it. You can ask questions there and get resources and get support. And we also post all of our events there. And we also are on Facebook and Twitter if you'd like to follow us. So Real also, in addition to working with parents, works with educators. We can come to your school, to your district. If you'd like to make an introduction, we have taught educators about introduction to the 2E learner. We also host learning difference simulations so that teachers can feel what it feels like to have some of these challenges. And we have a bunch of others you can see here, interesting topics, including teaching teachers how to teach to student strengths. And we can also come up with custom projects. And these are all at this moment free. And so if your district or if your teacher may be interested in this, please let them know about us.
All right, I wanted just to give you a really quick overview of the support group and how we're hoping it will work. We really appreciated everyone providing in their registration their ideas about what they're looking for in the support group so that we could help shape it and make sure that it's meeting the needs of everyone who is interested in participating. And there were 4 major themes that came up across everyone's responses, and we will be using these as the drivers for how we shape the group going forward. People were interested just in understanding and learning more about 2E and twice exceptionality. They also are hoping to meet other parents and support one another. Also, people are looking for tools, resources, and strategies that will help them understand their child, work with their child better, work with their school better. And then there are some people who are also interested in learning about how to advocate and introduce 2E to other people, to their schools and their educators. So we'll be excited to hopefully address all of these items tonight and in our future groups. And I just want to let you know we're very open to your ideas and shaping this group to be the way you would like it to be. This is just our first time out. So if you have any comments or suggestions for us, please let us know. We do have 3 dates scheduled in the future. We are working to make this group quarterly. If we find that people want to meet more frequently, we will definitely revisit that. But we thought starting with quarterly is a good good option because we hope people will attend some of our events in between. And we know just how busy everyone is. But our first meeting in 2022 will be January 13th, then again in April. And then we will meet over the summer because we know that the issues that we face with our kids in the summer are a little different than the ones we have during the school year, and also as a way to prep then for the next school year. Now back to Yael.
So because this is the first time this group is meeting, we'd like to give you a little bit of a short version of the Intro to 2E Learner talk that we usually do. So go ahead to the next slide. So this is actually an example from my own child when he was in 3rd grade. He was exceptionally bright and engaging, but getting him to do any classwork was a challenge if it wasn't in his area of interest. Is anyone familiar with that? And then he started to show less and less enthusiasm for school. After I talked to Oren's teacher about 2E students and their needs, she changed the way she thought about giving classroom assignments. And here's an example of that. She asked the class to illustrate a rule versus a law. And my son has a very vivid imagination. And he asked, could he make a law from his imaginary land of bears? And the teacher at first was like, no, you have to make a real law. But then she thought about what we had discussed about 2E kids. And she said, you know what? The lesson plan is actually to learn what is a law versus what is a rule. So if it's okay that if it's from an imaginary land, if that's what it takes to get him to participate. So she allowed him to make this law, which is in Babalea, art fairs are not allowed. And that was because Mom took him to too many art fairs that summer. And so this is one little vignette, and we don't pretend that 2E students are easy to figure out. We know we're parents of them, but when they're engaged, they elevate classroom discussions and become leaders in their areas of strength. And the kinds of changes like this, these small changes that this teacher made, helped him feel heard and connected to his classwork. But it also increased the engagement in the entire classroom because now everyone could use their imagination. And so we want to share with you this 2E lens that we gave to this teacher that helped so much so that you can hopefully have some of these improvements in your own classroom. So what is 2E? So this definition here is from the Bridges 2E Center. It is children who have distinguishing strengths, high abilities, potential in one or more areas, but at the same time, they also have complex challenges such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety, and other challenges. And of course, all children have strengths at sometimes and challenges at others, but 2E students combine this yellow and blue and are always operating in the green area. So they're always both having their strengths and their challenges simultaneously. And Seth Perler, who's a famous executive functioning coach, says, in a nutshell, if you have a child who you know is bright, but they struggle to show it at school, they may be 2E. And estimates are that up to as high as 5% of children may be 2E. So we're sort of used to seeing these bell curves of where kids may fall in, different areas of academics. And of course, no one's right in the middle of everything, but what's unique about 2E students is that most students fall kind of in the middle of this bell curve on everything, but 2E students spread to both extremes. So this is an example, and of course, all 2E students are different. This is just one example of one kid. So as you see, their general intellectual ability is extremely high, and so is their mathematical reasoning. But as you can see, their processing speed, how quickly they can work, and their writing are low. Now they're still in the middle of the curve, but they're very low compared to where their intellectual ability and math reasoning are. And so the child's math scores are showing up as just above average. So it's hard to understand, why is this child having so much trouble completing basic assignments and having anxiety during math? Even these scores that appear to be in the middle feel like a major deficit to 2E kids because their intellectual reasoning is so high. The disability is of slow processing speed and writing challenges are masking this child's gifted math ability, and their giftedness is masking their disability, making him appear average in math. Because of this discrepancy, Math is both too hard and too easy at the same time. This child feels that the math reasoning comes easily to him. He's ready to tackle more advanced concepts and he feels bored, but he can't process information quickly or write a lot of answers, so he feels like a failure. He can understand extremely advanced math concepts, but he can't complete a repetitive worksheet on something simple. Also, notice where the social skills lie on this bell curve and the behavior. This is called asynchronous development. So this child may be a fourth grader who can do math at the seventh grade level, but writes at a second grade level and maybe socializes at a first grade level and reasons at a 12th grade level. So you can imagine how confusing that is for this child, let alone for their parents and educators. This is one example of a 2E bell curve. Every child has a different chart, which is another reason that 2E students can be so tricky. A child could also be very strong in writing and have a low score in math. Oh, is this still me? I'm sorry. Of course, 2E students also have many strengths. So for example, one of the strengths is making connections across disciplines. We're going to show you some famous people who you may recognize, like Steven Spielberg and Steve Jobs, 3D spatial perspectives and thinking, and narrative reasoning, recalling stories, episode, and concepts like Whoopi Goldberg. So here are all very successful people with many strengths. They are all dyslexic. Now, here's somebody, a very famous author who has creative out-of-the-box thinking. Someone you may recognize from the Olympics who has a lot of enthusiasm. And risk takers, adventurers seeking novelty and curiosity like Richard Branson. They all have ADHD. And people with knowledge, skill, passion, motivation, and interest areas. Intently focused on details. These are all Dan Aykroyd, famous actors you may recognize. And of course, Greta Thunberg, logical thinkers and honest. Again, all very successful people who are autistic. So of course, right now, if you could imagine having any of these people in your K through 12 classroom, they may have been a challenge to educate, but because their strengths were able to shine, look at all the amazing things they can achieve. And so we really think 2E thinkers are world changers.
And we really do like to focus on the strengths of these kids because so often what is focused on is their deficit areas. But we have to acknowledge that these children do face some pretty tough and unique struggles because of the blend of their profile. So some of the struggles you may see include masking. So, that is kind of what Yael was referring to in terms of having their gifts hide if they're actually struggling in school, or the opposite is having only what they're not good at being what's shown and people not recognizing the gifts and talents that they do have to share. They may also be spending a lot of time just trying to fit in and blend in, which takes a lot of energy and effort and masking some of the challenges they have. You might see some of them acting out as the class clown because maybe they know that they are very bright, or other people recognize that they're very bright, but then they're not able to show some of those skills. Like maybe they're going to be asked to read out loud, or they're going to be asked to do something that they aren't feeling confident about. And so they might use class clown techniques to distract from the thing that they are feeling worried about. A lot of kids who have learning differences and are 2E will still have sensory challenges and meltdowns, and this can be very confusing to people. A lot of times kids who are twice exceptional, their learning difference actually hasn't been identified yet. A lot of times schools won't think they're qualified for an assessment because they may be meeting grade level standards, but then they're having some kind of sensory challenge or meltdown in the classroom, and they have unexpected behaviors. And it's because something is bothering their sensory system and they can't contain it anymore. They also might be confusing to people because they seem to be doing just fine academically, but then they're having a lot of social challenges. They may not know how to make friends. They may be very alone on the playground. They may be inappropriate with people. And it can be confusing because adults may think that they're this very bright child. Why can they not figure out the social aspects of school? Um, yeah, Elle, can you tell me what the little, is it angry? I can't, it's gotten blocked. Resistant, I see. It's gotten blocked by our, I love the transcription and I appreciate whoever asked me to turn that on. That's such a great new feature on Zoom. But you may see a lot of resistance from these kids because they feel like they should be able to do better than they are. They should be able to perform things better than they are. And that may make them resistant to trying things that they know are going to be hard for them or a challenge because they're just trying to protect themselves usually from some kind of embarrassment or having to admit that something is more difficult than people might expect it to be for them. You can have this unexpected underperformance as well. So, you could have, like, for instance, I have a daughter who is twice exceptional. She's now 15. She's incredibly brilliant at math, but she doesn't really like doing the math and it creates a lot of anxiety for her. So people always are expecting her to pick up on math things really quickly and really love math, but in the end she doesn't really like it that much. Or she's also very good at writing when it's something she wants to write and when it's in her area of interest. But if she has to write on command, that is very hard for her. And so teachers are often confused because she's such a creative person who is actually not performing up to her potential. One of the examples of this most recently is because she's autistic, irony is really tricky for her. I mean, she gets irony, she knows the definitions, and she can identify it, but she'll say, I can't do irony on command. And so when, like, every year there's some kind of irony writing assignment and she just really struggles with it. And that can be confusing when her journals that she's writing are so robust and interesting. But because those are in her area of interest, she can perform better there. A lot of times what you see then across all of the twice exceptional kids, whether the child is dyslexic or has ADHD, dyscalculia, autism, a shared characteristic across these kids often is anxiety. And it is often the first thing people will notice that will then spark them to do a further evaluation to understand what the root cause of the anxiety is. These kids are in spaces all the time where they are misunderstood, and it can be very challenging and tricky and anxiety provoking for them. What you might see eventually down the road, usually, as kids get older, is they may start just disengaging with school. It's not a space where they feel they can be successful, and so they start tuning out. And this can then sometimes turn into school refusal, which is something we've seen actually even more of, I would say, during the pandemic than before. But it is always a risk factor for twice exceptional kids that they will eventually say, school is not a safe place for me. They won't be able to verbalize this, but in their head, what they're going to be, school is not a safe place for me or a good place for me. I don't want to go there anymore. And so that happens quite a bit with twice exceptional kids. So one of the things that we really focus on when we talk with teachers, and I think this is very helpful for parents too, and a core value for us at Real is to really think about how we're framing all of these experiences we have with kids, because usually what teachers see are the struggles. And teachers are not often encouraged to focus on a child's strengths. They're usually more encouraged to look at where are the deficits, like where are they not meeting standards, where are they not quite up to where they should be developmentally. And a lot of times teachers will be very confused by the twice exceptional child because the behaviors they see in the classroom don't fit their expectation for how the child will be behaving or performing. And so we actually really encourage, based on some research out of Stanford, that if we can help adults in children's lives reframe the behaviors they're seeing, that it really makes a huge difference in the life of the child. So what we talk about is what Ross Green says is that kids are going to be doing well if they can do well. And so we need to understand that most of the time a child is having a behavior challenge or not having success at school, not because they won't do something, but more because they can't yet do it. So really, as adults, adopting the growth mindset in our work with our children And a big part of that is reframing how we see them. So what we really encourage is for adults to move from a very judgmental mindset that, this child is trying to make my life difficult. This child is defying me. This child is not being obedient. This child will not comply, to having a mindset that's more curious about the child. Like, what is it that is making it difficult for this child to participate fully in our class? What is making it difficult for this child to show completely what their skills are? Are there too many stressors? Are they missing a skill? Is there something we need to work on? And that really helps change our thought patterns about the child, so that we can move from a perspective of like, this child is lazy, this child won't work hard, this child won't listen to me, to like, what is actually in this child's way? And is there something I can do to help this child? And we encourage people to move from responding with rewards and punishments, which have actually been shown to not work well with any child, but especially not with 2E children who are like very savvy about these things and not usually bought into a system unless they have really helped to design the system. And so what we really work on is looking at the barriers that the children face and how can we find and remove those barriers. And this then transforms the child's experience. They go from really, when children are taught in a manner that they won't do something and that they're willful or lazy, it really leads to a lot of frustration, guilt, and shame, and can be very harmful to a child's mental well-being in the long run in terms of anxiety and depression, and their sense of who they are as a person. But when we reframe their behavior, when we get very curious, when we become very supportive and become part of their team and regulating their emotional responses, then they actually feel supported and they feel like they have a trusting relationship with the adults in their life, and they feel like they are in a psychologically safe space to learn. And so we have a few top tips that we always walk through with the teachers and parents when we talk about the 2E child. And really, the number one top tip, if we can say nothing else, is just how important it is to connect and to have a strong connection between the student, the teacher, and the parent, to all be working together on the same team and to really be involving the student in problem solving, solution finding, strengths development, all of these things. We must have that really good connection between all three pieces of the puzzle to really support the child. And then we have a few other top tips that we encourage parents and educators to think about, which is, first, we really need to do everything we can to let these children have their strengths and passions shine through. As we mentioned before, they so often are having their deficits focused on. They can't sit still. They don't have executive function. They can't read. Why can't they do math? Why can't they blah, blah, blah? And what we really need to do is really seek out what their strengths are, understand their interests, and find ways for them to live in that space where they're exploring those things, way more than their deficits are being focused on. That is not to say that the things they're struggling with do not need to be addressed. But what the research would show is that there are so many ways to leverage their strengths to teach them the other skills that they need, and that they will be much more engaged in learning when we make that happen for them. The second thing really is about being curious and empathetic. We find that we run learning differences simulations for teachers, and when they understand what it is like to be one of these children going through 6 hours a day in a traditional classroom, when they understand how challenging that is, it changes their whole perspective on how they work with kids. And the more curious we can be, the better. We also have to adjust to that asynchronous development that Yael mentioned, right? Like, we cannot expect a child is going to be performing at the highest levels in every single subject. A child who has dyslexia is going to struggle with different things. They may be, any of these children are going to be much stronger in some areas than others, and we cannot expect them to be the same across the board academically. The same is true with their social skills. You may have a child who really academically does pretty well, but socially they do not have the skills of a child their age, and that is something we just need to know to adjust our expectations around, that everyone does not develop at the same rate in every skill area. We've already talked about this collaboration, just that really importance of collaborating with a team, and not just like your teacher team, but when we think about the team for these kids, a lot of times it ends up having an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, maybe a regular therapist, maybe they're doing cognitive behavioral therapy. These are all part of a team that is part of the solution for helping the child. And we need to all work together and collaboratively and understand the important role each person can play in that child's life. It's also just really critical that we are flexible with these kids. And this is in a variety of ways. One of the key ones is that they are given multiple ways to show mastery. These kids are going to have different strengths in terms of whether they perform better writing a paper, making a video, creating an art project, doing a presentation. These kids need more flexibility in terms of how they're learning and how they're able to show their learning. And so the more we can give them those choices and give them those opportunities to shine, the better. And then the last one is just let them learn something new every day if possible, because that's what's really going to keep them going. That's what will keep them going back to school or engaging in learning. Is they really need to know there's a reason to go and there's something exciting going to happen in their day. We have drawn on a wide array of resources to create our Intro to the 2E Learner. We will definitely share out the slides with everyone who registered tonight so that you can take a look at some of the references that we really rely on in our work. And that is it for our Intro to the 2E Learner.